Hey there, if you clicked on this video to get my free Pocket 3 D-Log M LUT, you can download it down below. However, before doing so, I would appreciate if you could click like on this video and subscribe to my channel. Now, for those of you who want to maybe learn something new today, I'm going to show you how I color grade Pocket 3 D-Log M footage from start to finish. But before that, let me show you my most used settings on the Pocket 3. Starting with resolution and frame rate, I shoot pretty much everything in 4K 25 or 50p for the highest possible resolution and image quality. I always change the white balance manually based on the scene. I set the color to D-Log M for the most dynamic range and versatility in post-production, and I set the sharpness to -2 and noise reduction to -1 because I want complete control when manipulating my clips in post-production. When it comes to exposure, I pretty much expose all of my shots manually. To reduce noise in the footage, I try to maintain the ISO as low as possible, often at 50 or 100, and then adjust the exposure with shutter speed until the camera's exposure value is roughly at +0.0 on bright sunny scenes and -0.3, -0.7 in contrasty scenes. However, once I'm going to get ND filters for this camera, I'm going to set the shutter to 1/50 to get the most natural looking motion blur, and then just swap the ND filters depending on the strength to adjust the exposure. Now, if I'm doing something like vlogging, I'll switch the exposure to automatic with the EV set to -0.3 because I like my footage to be slightly underexposed, and the ISO to 50 to 400. Now let's get into color grading. Alright, so I'm now inside Final Cut Pro and I have here two clips on the timeline. One has been side lit pretty much, and the other one has been backlit. Let's start with the first one. First thing I'm going to do is adjust the contrast, saturation, white balance, which is basically basic color correction. So I'm going to add color curves to adjust the exposure and contrast, and I'm also going to open the waveform and I'm going to switch to Luma waveform to just see the exposure luminance basically. And typically the goal here is not to get below 0 with the shadows and above 100 with the highlights. I actually like to have my shadows at about 2, 3 because it looks a bit more cinematic, so to speak. I'm going to drag this shadow point down to about here, and I'm going to add an extra point in here and drag it down as well. Some extra points in here and in here, and I'm just going to add more points and play around until this shot looks pretty accurate to me in terms of contrast and exposure. Next thing I'm going to do is actually add color board, and I'm going to add saturation. Typically, I add like 80%, 75% of global saturation. Next, I would typically adjust the white balance, but honestly, this shot looks very accurate in terms of white balance. I'm not going to do anything, and I think I'm pretty much done. Actually, I am not done. I need to add some sharpness. Let me open the sharpen tool, and I'm going to add about 1 on the sharpness, and now I'm pretty much done with the basic color correction. And this is exactly what my LUT, my free D-Log M LUT will do for you. It will adjust the contrast and saturation, and you can download it down below. But please, if you can, click like on this video and subscribe to the channel because it really helps me to make better content and more videos. Let's continue. Now I'm going to start color grading this shot. First thing I'm going to do is add HSL curves, and I'm going to play around with the dominating colors, which are greens, yellows, and blues more or less. So let's add points in here, and I'm going to warm up this image just slightly. Something like this. I'm also going to increase the saturation in these colors. And I'm going to decrease the exposure in these colors only a little bit, because if you go too much with this tool, you can easily introduce artifacts. So be careful with the hue versus Luma tool. Now I'm going to play around with these blues in here. Let me go actually here. I'm going to actually leave it at blue, somewhere around here. And I'm going to desaturate this blue. And I think I'm done. So this is the before and after. Let's continue. Now I'm going to add color wheels, and I'm going to warm up this image pretty heavily by pushing the midtones towards, let's see, like green orange color, and then the highlights as well to these same colors. And the shadows, I'm gonna drag them towards blue, purple almost. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. This is the before and after, and actually I'm going to decrease the intensity to about 70%. And now I'm going to balance out everything by cleaning up the shadows. I'm going to add color curves, and I'm going to use this color picker in here and select this area and basically reduce the color in this area, which is orange. But I am going to slightly increase the color in here because I only want to affect the shadows and not the midtones that much. So if I'll crop into this tree on the right here, you'll see exactly what kind of adjustment I'm making here. So this is the before. As you can see, a lot of color, a lot of orange color, and now after, a bit more neutral and clean. And just a final touch up, I'm going to use HSL curves again, and I'm going to clean the saturation in the shadows. Let me zoom in again. This is a good area, but I don't want to completely remove it. I just want to find like a sweet spot and leave it there. I think somewhere around here looks good. This is the before and after, very minor, but I think it looks better this way. Another thing I can do to this shot is actually create like a vignette mask by adding color curves and creating a mask. And I'm going to create a mask around this bridge. And on the inside, I'm going to increase the exposure just slightly. And on the outside, I'm going to decrease the exposure in the midtones just to create a vignette. And this is the before and after, a pretty big difference. Now let's move on to the next shot. So let's add color curves. Going to drag this shadow point down to about 3. And then I'm going to add points and basically adjust the contrast and exposure. Okay, I'm kind of happy with how this looks. Now I'm going to add color board and increase the saturation to about 80%. Let's see, like 70% maybe. Now I actually came back to the exposure adjustment because I felt like it was a bit underexposed. So I'm making some final tweaks here, and I think this looks a bit better. Now let's add another color curves and slightly adjust the white balance. I'm going to open the waveform here and select the RGB overlay and adjust basically the colors. I think let's actually also isolate this t-shirt in here, this white t-shirt, to make it a bit easier. And now I'm going to switch to RGB Parade, and generally you want to have these 3 lines, the blue, green and red, even, but because this was in the shadows, I think there naturally should be a bit more blue than the rest, but I think still I'm going to slightly reduce the blue in here. And also I think I'm going to reduce the green just a bit. Actually, it looks a bit too warm to me now. I'm going to dial it back a bit. Somewhere around here looks definitely better. So this is the before, a bit too blue and green. And now it looks a bit more color accurate. And honestly, even if it's a bit warm, it's not really a big deal because I am kind of going for a warm look with this shot. Next, let's add sharpness. Again, like 1 on the sharpness. And now I'm actually going to create a mask around these 2 people here. Let's add color curves. I'm going to add a shape mask around these 2 people here. Let me actually try tracking this mask. Okay, so in the end, it kind of went crazy. Now I'm basically gonna go frame by frame and adjust the mask. All right, and now I'm going to increase the exposure on the inside just slightly. And on the outside, I'm going to bring it down. Let me check that everything looks good. I'm actually going to come back to the mask and increase the feathering a bit more because it was affecting the footage a bit too much. So let me see how it looks now. Yeah, now it definitely looks a bit more natural. All right, now I'm going to add an HSL curve and I'm going to play around with the dominating colors, which are oranges, yellows and greens. something like this. This is the before and after, a very minor adjustment. Next, I'm going to add color wheels, and I'm going to push the midtones towards warmer colors again, somewhere around here. Highlights as well to the same colors, and shadows towards teal. I think something like this looks good. This is the before and after, and I'm going to decrease the intensity to about 80%. And now I'm going to add color curves and clean up the shot a bit. I'm going to take the orange here in the midtones and slightly reduce it, just like so. If I'm going to zoom in, you'll be able to see the difference right here. This is the before and after. It just slightly takes out the orange in the midtones, which is where the skin tones are. And now I'm going to add another HSL curve, and I'm going to decrease the saturation in the shadows. Something like this. You can clearly see the difference in here, before and after. Anyhow, I'm recording already for 30 minutes on the Pocket 3 and it has not overheated on me, so that's a good sign. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. Also, go ahead and download my Pocket 3 LUT down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching.